Trigger warning. This podcast is about grief. Whether you are newly bereaved or whether you have been stuck in grief for years, I do hope this podcast brings you some comfort. Grief is such a universal experience, but we all do it differently. This podcast is not about fixing you or forcing the healing process, because there is no cure for grief. It can only be absorbed, experienced, loved and cared for. So whether you are doing it privately behind closed doors, or like me, you are kicking and screaming your way through, let's support each other. This is a safe space where we can come together and share experiences. My hope is that this podcast shines a light on your path and gives you the strength to navigate your way through the grieving process. My name is Louise Bates, and I'm so pleased we connected. I'm looking forward to interviewing people who have also walked this path to find out what worked for them, in the hope that it helps you too. I'm sending you so much love and support, and I look forward to sharing this crazy journey with you. Hello and welcome to this episode of A Gift for Grief. Before I introduce my guest today, I feel I need to preface this episode with a trigger warning, because we will be talking about suicide and bereavement by suicide. Now, this can be a very emotional subject, so if you feel this is too heavy for you, it might be a good idea to tune into a different episode and maybe come back to this one sometime in the future. Before the Suicide Act in 1961, it was considered a criminal offence to die by suicide. Those who attempted suicide and survived could face prosecution and imprisonment, while the families of those who died could also be held accountable. Unfortunately, remnants of this outdated mindset still persist today, as some individuals continue to use the term committed suicide, despite it no longer being a crime. When addressing the topic of suicide, the language we use plays a crucial role. It's important to approach this sensitive subject with compassion and understanding, as using stigmatising language can further ostracise individuals who struggle with mental health issues. Instead of saying committed suicide, it's more appropriate to use a term such as died by suicide or took their own life. By choosing our words carefully and avoiding judgmental language, we can help dismantle the stigma surrounding suicide. Openly discussing suicide is not only necessary for raising awareness, but also for encouraging those in crisis to seek help. Let's be mindful of the language we use and always lead with empathy when broaching this delicate subject. My guest today is Liza Wilson. Liza is a transformative coach, trainer, author, and international speaker, deeply committed to empowering women through life's transitions. Liza has assured me that nothing is off the table when it comes to talking about grief and loss. Her husband died by suicide, and she's happy to talk to me today about her experience. When Liza's father died years later, she believed the experience taught her how to truly let go. So welcome, Liza.
Thank you.
Thank you for being my guest today. Now, you describe yourself as American, Irish and British, so that explains your lovely accent. So how did that come about?
It is a good one. I always say some women collect shoes and I seem to collect passports and cookbooks. But how did that come about? So I am American by birth. I was born in America. My mother was first generation American. So her family is Irish. And as part of the grandfather clause, I was able to take advantage of gaining an Irish passport, which suited me perfectly when I was 21 and wanting to travel through Europe. So I gained that passport then, and I have now been living in the UK for 20 years. And when we had Brexit, my children said to me, "Does that mean, Mum, you are going to get deported?" So to ensure that I was not going to get deported, I went and got my British passport.
Oh, fantastic. Now, I've noticed we both offer similar treatments. I see you also offer Reiki and the emotional freedom techniques, but you've gone more down the line of coaching. And I know a little bit about your backstory, and I know you've had your share of life's challenges. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your story and how you got into this kind of work?
It probably started when I was born.
I like that.
Take
It's a
you
good
back
place
when.
to
It's a
start.
good place to start. So when I was 3, my parents split up. They separated and took about 7 years to actually divorce one another. And I imagine that is probably when my journey started in self-discovery and learning to regulate emotions. I ended up studying psychology for my university degree, and yoga came somewhere in between. Probably in my 20s, I really started to get more into the connection between body, mind, and soul. I think if I was a child and I was just doing a lot of talk therapy, that's exactly what it was, just a lot of talk therapy. And so I've always been fascinated by the brain, the human, and all of our life's experiences, what we sometimes choose ourselves to do. Well, it's always a choice, isn't it? But sometimes we are more in control of knowing the choices that we are making, and sometimes it's just not in our awareness what we're doing. Our subconscious mind tends to drive things, whether we like knowing it or not. So I've always been fascinated by the brain. When I'm a mom, I have 3 children, now aged 20, 18, and 16. But when my eldest was transitioning from primary into secondary school, we were really faced with some behavioral issues. And that led me down a whole new route, which was into the neuroscience side of things and really working with the nervous system. So it's just been a journey. I'm one of those lifelong learners, and find myself diving deeper and deeper into areas that typically pop up in my own life's experience. So, coincidence?
And I think you're a perpetual student, aren't you? You've just come from a training today, and which I'm very jealous about.
Oh, yeah, that's very exciting. So this one is beyond. This is the training I'm doing now is working really with connecting the body and the spirit. So we're really working now into generational trauma. Working with our imagination, sometimes even connection. It's what we need. So I love learning.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're both perpetual students. So how can people get in touch with you if they want to find out more information or want to work with you?
Probably best via email. Do you want me to share my email?
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. It's Liza Wilson, and it's Liza with a Z, Liza Wilson @me.com. And I do have a website, but it is currently being worked on.
Okay. Well, I'll share this in the show notes and then people can get hold of you if they want to. So, Liza, you lost your first husband to suicide when you were just 30 years old. How do you even begin to pick yourself up after such a massive traumatic shock like that?
It is a very good question. Sometimes I have picked myself up. I do know the answer to that. It took quite a long time. And upon reflection over the years, there were probably various stages where I thought that I truly had picked myself up. But, fast forward another year on, I realized, oh, actually, I hadn't quite picked myself up.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of hindsight, isn't it? It was not easy, and it was indeed a very long journey. I suppose my greatest lesson in how to pick myself up after such a tragic event then was the lesson of life is so precious and can be so short. And if it truly can be taken away in an instant, just like that, what am I doing with my time?
Yeah.
And it just, that thought never left my mind. Life is too short, and carpe diem, seize the day. All of these little sayings started to filter in, I suppose, throughout the following days of his death and following months. And it just made me, and I was 30. Had been married for 9 years and was desperate to be a mom. That's actually all I ever wanted to really be. That was my soul calling purpose, was to be a mom. And at 30, as that biological clock is ticking, I thought that had been taken away from me. And that, there's a little bit more background about my late husband's suicide. And then that left quite a large financial debt that I became responsible for. So that was an extra spiral for the 30-year-old.
On top of,
who would ever want me, right? And so it went very dark for some time. But the only light that I really had at that point in time was, we only live once. This is it. So that is really what helped me pick myself up. And it was still something that I had to do every day. I'll tell you as well, Louise, there was one phrase that stuck in my mind, and it was from my stepmother at the time. I couldn't tell you at what point. It was certainly within the first week after his death that I heard these words, and it was baby steps.
Yeah.
Baby steps. Today, you can only do what you can do. It might be that you just get out of bed today, and that is okay. And tomorrow it might be you get out of bed and you brush your teeth. And the next day might be adding in changing your underpants.
Yeah.
Baby steps. And that's really what got me through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you have any idea that your husband had any suicidal ideation?
No.
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 So it was a complete shock out of the blue.
It was a complete shock up until the day before. So if I give you a little background of it,
Okay.
I don't know how...
As much as you feel comfortable with,
Okay.
Liza.
So we were married for 9 years, and in that time, he was a pilot, and he was frequently away for work, flying. So it was not uncommon, for example, that he might, in the middle of the day, be in the house in a dressing robe. And I wouldn't have thought anything of that just due to the time difference in working. I myself was working more in the corporate world, but also did travel for my work at the time. So there were time periods throughout our marriage that we didn't see each other, not extending long periods of time, but it could easily be a 3-day period that we didn't see one another. Again, here's one of these moments of hindsight. I think in hindsight, he was probably depressed. I may not have recognized it and attributed it to his working hours. I didn't have any reason to believe, however, that he was depressed. So that was not an obvious So here we go again with the suicide. You'll notice I'll say a lot probably with hindsight, because that is really what we do with the suicide, because with the after a suicide, there's just so many questions, and they are all unanswered. And one of the challenges is to come to terms with is finding peace in not having answers, or finding a place to make sense of what just does not make sense. That's probably the best way to describe it. But leading up to his suicide, he died on a Sunday. And the week before his suicide, he had been away with his mates on a week's holiday. And he was coming back on the Saturday. On the Friday, and I still really cannot quite make sense as to why I did what I did on the Friday, but I had questions around our finances, and I went to the bank. I had a brief discussion with a colleague and friend of mine on the Friday afternoon during our lunch walk. And after that, I found myself going to the banks. And when I got to the bank, I discovered that we had an account in the red. And I thought, well, that's odd. That doesn't really make sense, but maybe it is. And I went to another bank to check another account, and that one also was in deficit. And I thought, oh, very strange. And so the day kind of just built up with me being a bit of a detective, figuring out, well, where's all the money? What's going on with these bank accounts? And I went back home and into the office, and I could not find a single folder with any of our banking information at all, which was a giant red flag. And by the end of that evening, what I had calculated is that we were in debt by probably 100,000 euro, which at the time we were both employed and were homeowners. And I thought, well, that is a lot of money. However, I'm sure we'll be able to manage, even if we have to sell the house or downsize or whatever, take out a loan, whatever. We should be able to manage this. By Saturday, I had discovered a bag of crumpled up banknotes in a bag in between the desk and the wall. And as they started to, as I brought those out and started to make sense of it, it became very clear very quickly that the debt was quite a lot more than 100,000. And that afternoon, he had returned from his holiday, and no, I should say before that, it was really when I had realized that it was more than 100,000. My first thought was, he's going to kill himself. And I can't really explain where that thought came from. It was such a strong intuition. I just knew that was going to be true, and that was going to be the case. And I was in the room with his brother and a colleague of mine at the time who was a CFO for the company that I was working with, who I trusted, and he was helping me figure out the finances. And I remember saying it out loud to both of them, he's going to kill himself. He's going to kill himself. And the shock from my colleague was, well, what? Of course he's not going to kill himself. You know, how do you even come up with that? And I don't know. Yeah. But I know this is going to be what it is. And I think his brother went quiet, and I think he knew. I think he knew as well. We connected in that moment. And so a couple of hours after that, my husband had returned, and I had planned with his brother to confront him just between the two of us, so not to include my brother-in-law. And when I did, Martijn, at my husband, had said, we do have a little bit of debt, but it's nothing we can't handle. But in that conversation, it was as if his eyes had just clouded over. He exited the conversation. Physically, he was there, but emotionally, he was no longer there. That was a really horrible evening because my own mind didn't want to accept that there even was an issue. I can say we actually that evening went to McDonald's and had a McFlurry as if nothing was happening at all. Equally, I also didn't want to let him out of my sight because I still had that strong feeling that he was going to kill himself. We went to bed. Next morning, he woke up and decided he was going to go and play football, to which I thought, what? We have some stuff to talk about. Can't go play football. Anyways, I realized quite quickly there was no stopping him. And you can't control another person anyway. So I let him go play football. But I also knew that was the last time I was ever going to see him. And it was. Yeah. So it was a day of waiting. That was probably sometime 9 a.m. And I believe it was around 11 that evening the police had come. And I had been to the police a couple of times throughout the day to report him missing, but because he was an adult and he had given times, it was a day of just waiting for
confirmation.
Yeah.
Oh, Liza, so you've got the loss of the finances, the loss of that relationship that you thought you had, and then his death on top.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And over the years, I realized there was loss of also so much more.
Yes.
And even in the moment, the finances hadn't actually occurred to me at all. It wasn't even a concept. And in fact, it's interesting because he died in 2003. So we're now 2025. It was in 2022 that I truly became aware of the financial trauma that I had suffered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because loss does come in many forms, doesn't it? It's not always the loss of a loved one. So,
so that brought its own issues. The suicide for me was, of course, the main trauma. It was a trauma, and it was years of healing because it's layered. It comes in so many layers, what we do with our emotions, whether they're suppressed, whether we realize them, what's going on. That was a very, very long journey, the recovery. And it wasn't just mine, it was the families as well.
Yeah.
For us, culture certainly played a role in all of that as well, because he was Dutch. I was living in the Netherlands. Experienced that in another language. Then also being American, just death in itself. There were, I was able to have, it was a closed coffin. He was hit by a train. But I had him in his coffin in my home for the week before we even had a ceremony.
Okay.
We don't do that in America. That isn't even, in fact, I remember my family thinking that was sick.
Isn't it interesting how different countries and cultures deal with funerals? And in Ireland, it's over within sort of a day or two, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so interesting how the different ways
and how
time scales.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have to say, for me at that time period, it was, I get the right word, but it was so wonderful to have him there in the home with me. I found that comforting.
Yeah.
And I suppose with death as well, and that grieving period, we tend to go into autopilot. Those first, I can't even label how long is that, days, weeks, months, years. That varied from day to day. But we're also dealing with other people's loss and ways of grieving, and there's just so many layers involved in any type of grieving, and that's what I really noticed with the suicide in particular. Everybody speculated why.
Yeah.
And that was horrible. That was so horrible for me to experience, because it just took away from the actual ability to just grieve.
Did you feel supported at the time?
I felt supported at different moments and in different times. I was supported. I was absolutely supported. I had people around me. My family from the US had flown over to stay with me. I believe my father actually stayed with me for a month in my house. My friends were my support system. Absolutely amazing. We were probably the only, or the first couple of say, a group of 5 to be married. Nobody really had children at that point in time in our lives. So I had a lot of attention from a lot of loving friends. What wasn't supportive, because I am so forever grateful for having had them and all of their love and support. What wasn't so supportive is that some of that love and support became very overbearing. I think there was a lot of fear that I would become suicidal.
Okay.
And so although they labeled it as support, I sometimes felt like I was under house arrest.
Okay.
Yeah. And that made it sometimes challenging as well to find space to grieve. And I found myself a lot in the position of the supporter, because others had so many questions. And obviously being the wife, people thought I would have the answers. So, And I think with suicide, what I definitely remember, everybody needed to talk. Everybody needed to talk.
Okay.
Yeah. And some of us needed, there was a bit of a shock.
Yeah.
In having to say how they died, that he died. I know that that first evening, I remember being on the phone in order to call my parents and tell them, and I couldn't. I just couldn't even put it into words. Didn't want to hear it. Didn't want it to be real.
Yeah.
But then I could hear somebody else say it. But then it was so surreal. There was a lot of dissociating for me in that time.
And I suppose that's like a survival mechanism, isn't it? You're disassociating. And I know, according to the Samaritans website, as many as 1 in 5 people experience suicidal thoughts at some time during their life. People don't talk about it, do they? Do you feel there's still a stigma around this subject?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have found, I'll say I have had suicidal thoughts, not just then, but I have throughout my life. And I know many people who have had suicidal thoughts. One thing I will say about Martijn is he never verbalized ever anything about suicidal thoughts. And I've had, I just can't remember if it was before his death. I think it was. I had the sister of my best friend attempted suicide. And I've had a couple of other experiences with suicide as well. And I've not done any research, but statistically speaking, in those that I know, those that actually did succeed in killing themselves, they did not verbalize any suicidal ideations at any point in time. So it makes me wonder, those that talk about wanting to kill themselves or wanting to die, perhaps they are still with us because of their ability to talk about it.
That's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. I've heard that said before as well.
Yeah.
I mean, like you, I have had the thoughts. There was one big time when my son died, I just was so racked with pain. I just wanted to stop the earth and get off. And there was almost no thought process there. I just wanted to drive my car into something and hit something and, drop out. But I didn't tell anybody that, didn't talk about it. I've only talked about it now because of the podcast and the subjects. And I think it's important that we do talk about it, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, I do believe it's really healthy to talk about it, and it's okay. I think it's part of the process. Like you, I didn't tell anybody of my thoughts in the time as well, especially since I was literally under house arrest.
Yeah.
But I absolutely did have those thoughts then, had them previously and have had them since. And to be fair, sometimes when I've had those thoughts, it's not necessarily because my days are dark and I'm seriously depressed. There is a sense of, it's just too hard. And just let it stop. Just make it stop.
Yeah.
But I know even in those moments, I'm not actually thinking I'm going to kill myself.
Yeah.
I might fantasize about it.
Yeah.
There's always other thoughts that come in that bring me back, that help me find that way forward, whether it's those that I would leave behind or the fact that he killed himself and how I think, I could never do that to anybody that I love, for whatever it is. But I do believe it is very important to be able to talk about it. I've experienced it with two of my 3 children as well in phases of being teenagers, especially around the COVID time. And my daughter, previous to COVID, was suffering with severe anxiety and just could see no reason.
Yeah.
And we talked about it openly. And I'm again, here's where I'm grateful for my experience with the suicide, is because I can talk about it and know that it can happen. And I feel that made me such a more powerful mom.
Yeah.
To be able to speak to my daughter about her thoughts of suicide.
Yeah.
And we could actually go through that. We could explore it. And even to the point of, well, how would you do it?
Yeah. I think actually it's a very common thought that people have, because we all have obtrusive thoughts, don't we? I mean, it's part of being human. And some people are just better at not listening to those thoughts. But with suicidal thoughts, I think a lot of people get them, and it's like you say, we just don't talk about it. So the fact that you've been through that experience, you know how important it is to talk about it, and you can talk to your children about it. I think that's incredible, really.
I think with things like suicide or teen pregnancy, that might be another one. I don't know.
Yeah.
The topics that become taboo, shame lives there too, doesn't it? It just, there's so much there. And when we don't talk about it, that's when we isolate ourselves. It is. Now, I say we have to talk about it. I don't mean we can just talk to anybody about it.
No. It's a time and a place.
It's a time and a place. And getting the right support is very important. And I think back as well to the evening that I opened the door and the police were standing there. I remember looking beyond their shoulders just in case they found him and they brought him home, and I was wrong. Having a compassionate witness to the experience is so healing in itself. And it doesn't mean that they even have to say anything, right?
Just be there.
Just being there. So whether it's in the moment or 5 years later, or 10 years, or 2 years, or 2 weeks, or whatever it is, whoever we do speak with, the person who's being spoken to, if I were to say anything to them, it would be, hold that space. There are no words that bring comfort in moments like that. Nobody has the answers that the person is looking for. So there is absolutely no way to fix the situation. It is what it is. There is no undoing it or unchanging it. But just being there and allowing that person to speak.
Yeah.
There's so much power in that.
Yeah. So, Liza, what helped you to navigate your way through? Did you have any counselling?
I did have counselling. I will say that I don't think the counselling actually helped me. And that's not to say that counselling is not helpful, because I'm a huge believer in counselling. The counselling that I had, to be fair, and at the time I didn't realize this because I wasn't working in the profession that I am now. The counselors that I had were inexperienced, and quite honestly, it was too big for them to deal with, and they were in way over their heads. So I didn't know that at the moment. And because of that, probably some of my trauma may have been worsened. Yeah, it's almost like a re-imprinting of the experience over and over. And there's so many times you can tell a story, and each time you tell the story, and memory is a funny thing anyways, isn't it? It certainly gets shifted and watered down as time goes on, and as we do this. But these are the things that I know now. I didn't know that then. The worst for me, I suppose, in my counseling at the time was, you're limited to an hour.
Yeah.
And we were not getting anywhere in an hour with me.
They call it a 50-minute hour, don't they?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not long.
And when you open up a wound or something there and then it's time to go home, well, that was soul crushing for me.
Yeah.
I did, and I also joined some groups. I also joined some groups. That was okay, in the sense that I knew I wasn't alone and I could hear other people. The challenge for me there was they were very different situations.
Yes.
And I didn't feel, I still felt very alone, even though I knew I wasn't alone. Funnily enough, and this is probably the worst thing, I really wouldn't advise anybody to go and isolate, but that is actually what I did. I took off for a month with my cat and my dog and my many books on death and life after death and communicating with the dead, and I must have had 20 books.
Yeah.
The one name I do remember is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross,
Yes.
the guru on grieving in the process. And I went away for a month and I didn't talk to a soul. I journaled and I read and I cried, and I would not have been able to do that without my dog and my cat. But they were my comfort because they provided unconditional love. And they didn't talk back. They just listened.
Yeah.
Just listened and let me pet them. And I'm a very sensory person. So for me, that was my healing.
And that was what you needed to do.
Yeah. And I went to the mountains, and that is my safe space, safe place. That is what I needed to do. Yeah. And that was my reconnection to thyself. I wrote many letters to him. I wrote letters to me, but my past self. I wrote letters to my future self. I wrote and I wrote and I wrote.
And it's a way of processing your experience, isn't it? Yeah. And everybody needs to find their way that works for them.
Yeah.
But can you remember how you felt the first time you went to a social or family event afterwards?
I will answer those in two different questions because social and family were very different. So socially, I definitely remember how I felt. First of all, I didn't really want to go. I forced myself to go in order to be social. I do remember I never allowed myself to have fun. I couldn't. I was supposed to be grieving.
Yeah.
I had a role to play. I was the widow, and it was too soon. It was always too soon. And anytime I felt an ounce of joy rise within, I could quickly squash that because it just was not okay. So there was that. But I did try. I did force myself to go to some social gatherings. I had a little bit of alcohol. I quickly tried to not have alcohol because I also knew if I'm having alcohol, I am going to become an alcoholic. I will drink myself to oblivion so I do not have to feel the pain. So I was very strict with myself.
Yeah.
So I didn't allow myself any pleasure. I didn't allow myself any alcohol. But I suppose these were really self-preservation, or at least the alcohol part. I did not want to be saddled with more issues that were going to be more challenging to get out of. The other challenge I had socially is I found that people no longer knew how to speak to me.
Yeah.
And that was really hard because I would witness people downplay or dismiss their own feelings in light of being in my company because they had not experienced anything like me. But by not speaking to me, again, I felt removed.
Yes.
And that was really hard. And again, here, this was my supporting role because now I'm taking care of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was a lot of responsibility there. Family, completely different story because my late husband's family became my creditors. So that was a very difficult, that I really didn't partake in many family gatherings. I had a lot of support from my brother-in-law who was not a creditor. It's not to say I didn't have support. I did, but it was very different. And the relationship had clearly changed. I tried to have as little anger as possible in the whole time because everybody else was angry at him. Everybody was angry at him.
Did you feel angry and just push it down, or?
I questioned that. I genuinely don't think I felt angry. I don't want to say I never felt angry. I eventually, in the years to come, did become angry, and have addressed the anger and also, of course, what's underneath it. But right after his suicide, I actually felt I needed to protect him. So on the flip side, so we had his family, but then we had my family. And my family struggled in speaking about him. He became quite quickly the con man. So there was like a negative everything that had to do with him. So his name quite quickly was removed from even the vocabulary, which also was very invalidating for me because now I can't really even speak about him because even if I do, they have nothing nice to say about him. And that's also not really supportive or helpful. So there was that. So from family perspectives, that was quite a challenging, it was like a landmine to navigate that was. But my own anger, I took more on the role of, well, actually, I spoke to him all the time. He was dead, but I spoke to him regularly from the moment he walked out the door that Sunday morning. I did not stop speaking to him. I texted him a lot that day, didn't get anything back. I left a lot of voicemails, didn't get anything back. That, of course, stopped that Sunday evening, but from Monday on, I just spoke out loud to him all the time. And that was helpful because sometimes I could yell at him, but mainly I remember my conversations being like, right, all right, well, I'll clean up your mess then.
Yeah.
I've got this. Don't worry about it. And I started to see him as, he was a victim.
Yeah.
He was a victim because at the end of the day, his debts, or our debts, I'm going to say gambling. He was not a gambler. He did not go to a casino, but he played the stock market every day, and he was doing call and put options. And so the months following his death, I became a bit of a detective. What did he do the days before? What led up to, what was he experiencing? What led up to, was that holiday with his mates actually then his way of saying farewell to his best mates? Yes, I think so. But again, thousands and thousands and thousands of questions you're left with, people were coming to the door who I had never known, who were grieving him. Well, who is this woman? Has he had an affair? I mean, there was so much to have to deal with, and how do you even know what to deal with and when? So I went very automatic pilot and took care of what needed to be taken care of, and that was probably also my saving grace to not have to deal with too much emotion for the time being.
Yeah. It's a distraction.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's and not different to any other death. I think there is that time anyways after a death, whether it's suicide or not. Everybody kind of comes together. Everybody gathers around whoever it is that is grieving, or or in the group, and we have to arrange things, don't we?
Yeah.
And so we take care of that. But there comes a time when everything's been arranged, everything's been done, and then everybody goes back to life the way that it was, except for you.
Yeah.
And you're left with yourself, and then what? And yeah. So, that those that grieve understand that. And that's a language all in itself, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, how would you describe grief to someone who has never had a significant loss?
My first instinct was as if somebody just puts their hand into your chest, grabs your heart, twists it, and pulls it out. And leaves you. Is that a scene from Star Wars or something? I feel like I've seen that happen somewhere. I don't know what it is, but that is what it would feel like. Your heart is just ripped from your being.
Yeah.
And you are left with a dark, absent hole that is just empty.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
And some people find the phrase, "I'm sorry for your loss," to be lacking in sincerity and empathy. How would you personally convey your condolences to someone who is grieving, having gone through your experience?
That was a very big one for me, because the other one I hated was, well, at least you have the memories, or you'll always have the memories. There are no words.
Yeah.
That's mine. There are no words.
And that's so true. And it's an acknowledgement at some level that you're acknowledging their grief, because that's so important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's worse to be ignored.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it is so, I try to go on to that other side as well. What is it like for somebody to say, I'm sorry for your loss, or condolences, or, I've been on that side as well. What do you say? And there's a lot of people out there that just do not know what to say.
Yeah. And that's the best thing to say. So I don't
shouldn't
know
even
what
laugh.
to say.
It's terrible. I'm
Yeah.
laughing because it's just so horrible.
Yeah.
And my mother was one of those people. I came back home the evening after our ceremony. Martijn was cremated, and that was a very quiet ceremony. And I don't know if it was the evening before or whatever, but I had invited a large group of his colleagues and everything. But coming home that evening, so mind you, Martijn came back with me in his box, and I had come home, and my cousin had come up from Paris visiting. I don't think he had actually even ever met my husband at the time. And my mum said, "Liza, Dan hasn't even seen your house. Give him a tour."
Okay.
And I thought to myself,
Weird.
"Oh, are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
I thought some other things, but I won't use that French here. But, and I did. I gave him a tour. I didn't even know how to respond to that. It was just so left field.
Yeah.
But I realize some people just do not know how to connect or support or what to say.
Yeah.
And what do you do in that situation? So my advice is there are no words.
Yeah, that's perfect. Now, you're also an author, and you are a contributing author to the book Golden Threads, Women of Wisdom. Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
What a great experience it was to be involved in writing that book. It is a collaboration of 15 women who have written a chapter each about some life experience that they had that was profound, that shaped their lives in one way or another. And I was a part of this group. I did not know any. I knew one other woman writing before writing. But when we launched that book and we came together, having read each other's stories, what an amazing experience to be part of something so special.
Yeah.
Where and it really is that when I wrote a chapter about grief, I chose not to write about the suicide, but I chose to write about the loss of my father. But loss is what many people can relate to. You know, others, just the stories are remarkable, and the women were amazing. And to be involved in that book, hoping that even if just one story reaches one person, that's successful, isn't it? But to have 15 different stories, it's powerful.
Well, I read your chapter in the book, and you wrote about how the death of your father taught you how to let go.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yes. So letting go was something that was said to me for many, many years after my late husband's suicide. Literally in comments to me from friends and family, "Liza, you just need to let go." And that was a sentence that I could not make sense of. I did not understand what that meant. I don't know what that means. How do you let go? I never really could relate to that. I could understand with letting go of a grudge or letting go of an identity. You know, I was a wife. I am a widow. am remarried. I can do that. I could understand letting go of that, but letting go. And do you really want to let go of somebody that you love who has died? What? I couldn't work that out. Why would I want to let them go? I loved them. I want them. They're part of me. They're a part of my experience now. Like, why would I want to let that go? I just couldn't make any sense of it. But, and I do laugh at this because of the sense of humor that I have. Sometimes it's a little dark and twisted. I do dead jokes as well now. But I lost my dad. I didn't lose him. I didn't lose him. He died. Again, this is how we talk. I lost somebody, isn't it? Which is ridiculous because I know exactly where he is, and I didn't lose him. He died. My dad died about 2 years ago, and it was not a sudden death like what I had experienced with the suicide, but it was an unexpected death in that I still believe, had he done some exercises and taken better care, he'd still be with us today. So one of those. But he was sick. And in the hospice, as I was saying goodbye, or not really wanting to say goodbye, but as I was forced really to say goodbye, my hand was on his heart. And by this point in time, it was just myself and him and my stepmother in the room. Everybody else had said their goodbyes and left. And I heard my dad speaking to me, again, as if I was a child. Liza, it's time for you to go. I could feel him saying, it's time for you to go. And in that moment, it dawned on me, oh, because you want to die. You're trying to let go of your life here so that you can cross over and die. And here I am holding on to you because I don't want to say goodbye and I'm not letting you go. So it just, and it was literally so comical and easy all of a sudden because I was told off. It's time to go. Yes, Dad. And of course, I have to let you go so that you can go. And that was that. And I stood up, kissed him. Love you. I'm letting you go. And I walked around the bed. And I don't actually remember if I kissed my stepmother or not, but I remember it was almost as if I was handing him over to her, just as he had handed me my hand, in marriage. And that was that. And I was able to leave. And it wasn't that I left happy or anything, but I was able to understand the power of what it means to let go. Yeah. And sometimes, and I now know this because my firstborn is 20, sometimes we do have to let those that we love go, don't we? For better or worse, for greater good and all of the rest of it. And that's okay. It doesn't mean we are forgetting who they are or, letting go just in that case it just made so much more sense. And that actually helped me learn, and this is where it really gets kind of funny because remember I said that my late husband died in 2003 and my dad died in 2023, so 20 years later. Yeah. I'm now revisiting letting go of my late husband in a different way. And my relationship with him has changed.
Yeah. And grief is an ongoing process, isn't it?
It really is.
Constantly changing.
And you never know when it's going to come out. I mean, I even in my chapter about my dad, I describe it much like the waves. One wave could be a tsunami for all you know, and the next one might just be a little trickle of water on your toes. But you don't know what you're going to get or when you're going to get it or when it's going to hit and how you're going to receive it.
Yes, yeah. But do you believe that grief has the potential to bring unexpected blessings into your life?
Absolutely.
Positive insights?
Absolutely. This is probably the strongest foundation of my work as a coach is I see all obstacles as opportunities.
Yeah.
And death has certainly taught me, well, not just death, but perspective. It's perspective. How do we see things? How are we wired to see things? What, do I have my rainbow colored glasses on, or do I have my dark sunglasses on? How am I looking at this? How am I experiencing this? And it comes back to that beginning where I said, one of the things that got me through was life is short.
Yeah.
In this human body and this experience, on this, in this time frame, it's short. So what are we doing with our time, with our energy? What are we doing? So greatness comes from tragedy.
Yeah.
Death can be beautiful.
I do believe there is a gift in everything. And I think with grief, it is like a badly wrapped gift.
One you might not want to receive.
Yeah. But I think in time, as you make peace and accept the gift, you can see the gift.
I just said one you might not want to receive.
Yeah.
But I know that sometimes you might want to receive it.
Yeah.
So I don't want to discount those times or those families that are in those predicaments where death is welcomed because of the pain that their loved one is in.
Yeah.
And I suppose maybe that's why I wasn't angry as well, because of the mental anguish that he must have been in to have gotten to the point to decide to take his own life. Because we're not really wired to do that. And I think that helped me. Now, with my father's death, of course, there was a little bit more anger because there were things that he could have done to avoid death.
Yeah.
Fight it a little bit longer. However, because of my previous experience, I was also able to gracefully gift Dad that out.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it. I understand it. And now, 2 years on, I've got a little tennis elbow and I have to do physical therapy for that. And I don't want to because it hurts.
Yeah.
But equally, I know if I don't do it, that's just going to get worse, isn't it? And we have to go through the pain.
Yeah.
There is no getting around pain. We have to go through it. And well, that's probably been my greatest lesson with death, because grief hurts. We talk about emotions. Love is a powerful emotion. Anger is a powerful emotion. But grief, I sometimes wonder, and all three of those are so close, aren't they?
Well, grief is a combination of so many emotions, isn't it? It's a real mix.
I read somewhere that grief is love with nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And that resonated with me so powerfully.
Yeah.
Because that is true. And I, when my dad died, after the day or two after, he lived at the beach. I went to the beach and I was going to make a sand castle, and before I knew it, I was making a sand mermaid, and I poured so much grief into that mermaid. There was anger in making a wild hairdo, but creativity, like that was my expression of my grief. I made a beautiful mermaid with all of my pain and all of my love, and that was healing. If I look back after Martijn's death, I made some beautiful journals. Probably probably wrote many books. Who knows? Maybe I'll dip in one day. But creativity is certainly a channel for us to. I mean, you've created your podcast.
Yeah, and I think we all need to do something with that grief, don't we?
We absolutely need to channel it
for
somewhere,
me,
don't we?
grief is just another word for love.
Yeah.
It's just how we hold it inside.
Yeah.
And in the early days, it's raw and it's painful.
Yeah.
And over time, it becomes love.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
It
so
shifts, doesn't it? Yeah.
Liza, from what you've shared with me so far, I'm getting a sense that you're a very spiritual person.
I am.
I would love to know what your thoughts are about the afterlife.
Oh, I am a very spiritual person. I don't know if I'm decided what there is, but I am certainly open. I will definitely be the first to say, just because we can't see it doesn't mean it is not there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't really believe our physical body dies. Our physical body stops working, but it is filled with who we are, which is just energy, and we are released.
Yeah.
And I just feel we are all connected. We are all one, and we are just released back into our oneness, I believe. There are other dimensions that I am learning about and am aware of. I mentioned I have a lot of conversations with my late husband. I do with my father as well, and with others that I love. I have regular conversations. I do believe that I receive communication back.
So do you believe our loved ones can give us signs?
Absolutely.
And you've had signs?
Absolutely. Regularly. Yeah.
So if you could give your loved ones a message now, what would you say?
I love you and I miss you. Yeah. I mean, I think certain ones, I would certainly have different things to say. My favorite uncle just died a few weeks ago, the day after my birthday, and that was again a very unexpected death, and I'll say his death, in some ways, I have the most peace with, in the sense that he went exactly how he wanted to go. And he shares my beliefs and energy.
Yeah.
And, okay. And with my dad, he is in me. Yeah. So I think, whereas if, with my late husband, I don't really have anything more to really say that I don't already say.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Oh, Liza, thank you so much for sharing your very personal story. The more we talk about suicide and bereavement by suicide, the more people will learn how to engage in this subject.
I hope so.
It doesn't need to feel scary or awkward, but people do worry that they may say or do the wrong thing. But the wrong thing is avoiding these conversations. So no matter how uncomfortable it makes you feel talking about this subject, imagine how the person grieving is feeling. So let's break the stigma surrounding this topic and talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today, Liza. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for allowing me to have the opportunity to speak about it as well. I am aware, even as I sit here, there are so many areas within the topic of suicide that I probably didn't even touch upon that I know would be helpful. And I just think it is, I hope that anything I have had to share can just, again, help at least one person. And what you do is amazing, having this podcast because it's not even just about suicide, grief. We don't really allow ourselves to share our grief.
Yeah.
And if we did, can you imagine the compassion that we would really be experiencing?
Yeah.
As
Well,
a
I
whole.
really appreciate what you've been through. And, I can't imagine what you've been through, but you've come...
But like me, I can't imagine what you've been through. And I think that's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
That I can appreciate the depth.
I think there's another podcast to come out. I'm sure we could talk for hours, me and you. So maybe in a few months we'll have another podcast and go even deeper.
Yeah, it'd be lovely.
Talk about more stuff. So thank you very much, Liza. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Gift for Grief. Please feel free to share it with your friends and family, and let's encourage others to become more grief literate. If you're struggling with your grief or worried about your mental health, please do speak to your doctor. If you would like to join me on my social media groups, check out the show notes for all the links, and I look forward to connecting with you next time. The music on this podcast was written and recorded by Matthew Bates and can be found on his 2 albums, Fight Back and Kaleidoscope.